Thank you.
Yeah.
Please. Okay. All right, this one's going to be fun.
This is going to be good.
So let's start with short selling.
Okay.
It's not for the faint of heart. What the hell got you into short selling? And what do you think maybe in your early years allowed you to be as effective as you have been?
So first of all, thanks for having me. Mo asked me to come do this he called me about 8 times. I said no, 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 and no. And I just want to tell everyone I operate with no filter. So if I say anything that offends anyone, I want to apologize ahead of time. But you do wonderful things for these great causes. So I could not say no. And you're really commended for what you do.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to say that. Truly. So I've always had the investment bug. I graduated a place called Babson College in 1982. The market was terrible, interest rates were high, my grades were awful, I was never good at school. And I got a job at a place called the Northern Trust in Chicago. And a fellow by the name of Paul Landini liked my SARI program. And he said, "What are you doing tonight?" I said, "Nothing." And video games were just coming out. So he said, "Let's go to the arcade, the coin drop arcades, and see how their business is doing, because I think video games are going to put the coin op games out of business." So we befriended the manager, and all of a sudden their business was going like this. We shorted something called Bally Manufacturing, which was the biggest factor in pinball machines, and essentially the stock went from 30 to 3. And I said, "This is a whole lot of fun, so let's get after this." But you're right, to do this, something is terribly wrong with you, because it's dangerous. You have no friends, you have no allies. The companies don't like you, the holders don't like you, and I wish I would have known that way back when. I mean, I've done very well over the years, but I love it. But it's a tortured existence.
Yeah.
Because and I mean tortured.
So maybe on the note of that tortured existence, like what lessons, perhaps for investors in this room, have you learned the hard way from experience, and maybe lessons that you've learned from other short sellers in the business?
Well, a lot of my peers are out of business and couldn't make it to the end. I'm still doing this. I do it for myself because managing a fund shorting stocks is the closest thing to impossible, because your investors have no tolerance for it. They say they like it, but they really don't. They can't deal with the volatility. So when you lose and you're early, being early is wrong. Being early is deadly. Thesis creep: if you have a story and your story changes, you should probably get out of your position. That goes for longs or shorts. But for shorts, it's especially bad. So, I mean, I've been short, this can't be yogurt. I have tattoos all over my back, getting killed there. I think the thing went up 3 or 4 times on us before we got out. Then when their business fell apart, we got back in and ended up making. I always say, don't climb the tree to wrestle the jaguar out of the tree. Wait till someone shoots the jaguar, and then when it falls out of the tree, you can cut it up. So being early is wrong. It's not good. So I pick my spots. I mean, all the guys who are short Tesla have been nothing but wrong and have gotten destroyed. And I've never been short Tesla because Elon Musk, good, bad, or indifferent, is a protected man. So I'm not interested in going after protected people. I go after idiots, imbeciles, criminals, frauds, and there's a few of them here in Arctic Mexico, that's what I call Canada. So that includes a lot of people in subprime mortgage, by the way.
Okay, we're going to get to that. I want to spend some time on that. But first, I just want to set the stage, okay? You're a one-man army, and yet as a solo market vigilante, for lack of a better word, you've uncovered some of the largest frauds in history. And at the same time, these organizations like the SEC, which has 5,000 employees, FBI, I think, has 35,000 employees, and on,
RCMP,
RCMP. Yeah.
OSC,
Oh, yeah.
Alberta Security Commission, who sued me. Then I sued him back and won.
So why is that? What are these 35,000 people missing that you're catching? Why are you directing them to the scene after you've laid out the evidence and explained it like it's meant for a 10-year-old?
That's a really good question, and here's the problem, at least in the United States and to some degree here. If you work at the SEC, you probably make between 120 and 180,000 a year, and that's fine. But you really make your money after about 5 years at the SEC going to work at a fund like Citadel or going into private practice, and you make 5 to 6 times what you make at the SEC. So if you do your job at a light level and don't piss anyone off, you're employable at these law firms or these hedge funds. If you do your job at a high level and really bust people and crack down, guys don't want to hire you because you go against the grain. So I've been saying for quite some time that the markets are broken, the world is broken. It's especially broken since COVID, that people just don't do their jobs. They don't, work is hard. It's hard to follow a process. It's very easy to take shortcuts, work from home, not push it, and just collect your salary and not make a difference and not do what you're supposed to do. And 5 years later, Citadel will hire you or BlackRock will hire you, pay you 5 times more, and you live a happy life. And for a lot of people, that's okay. For me, it's not okay because, Ubben, who's my friend and I think is one of the greatest investors I've ever known, and he's into ESG. I mean, I'm a walking ESG machine because I rid the world of horrifically bad people. And it's if you back up and think about it, a lot of individuals, whether you're getting ripped off on drug pricing, that hurts Joe Sixpack. You rip them off in subprime mortgages, you use usury rates and extend amortization. You rip off hardworking people who can't afford, life the way everyone in here can. So part of, how I try to make a difference is if I can expose and get rid of the worst in society, at least fraudsters in the capital markets, I think I'm making a difference. But counting on the government, I just don't do.
So, but in the process, again, as a one-person army, you're going up against some really powerful forces.
Yeah.
And some really powerful people. You've gone up multinationals, large companies, sovereign entities, DOJ, FBI. You mentioned some of them. This is David and Goliath on steroids. So what has been the ramifications for you of taking some of those stands? And then also, how are you not peeing in your pants as you walk?
I'm a tough guy.
Yeah, I get that. But what have been the ramifications? Let's start there, if any.
Well, the craziest story, the guys from Learn Out and Houseby threatened to kill me a couple times, which wasn't exactly funny. So that's when the FBI were my pals, and they actually looked out for me in that one. And it was Russian money launderers who didn't like me exposing that. And Learn Out and Houseby at the time was the largest fraud ever exposed in Europe. So that was a kick, and that thing went to zero. But I had a recent 5 years ago, I was in a tangle with a company called MiMedx, which was a medical scam out of Georgia, and the CEO was a 75-year-old guy, and he was politically connected, and I exposed him, and I later found out he donated $15,000 to Senator Isaacson in Georgia, used his influence to get the FBI to come pay me a visit at my house. So one day I'm having lunch with a friend. I'll never forget this. His name is Billy Buckingham, and he was dying of cancer. So it was sort of the last time I ever saw him. And knock on the door, 2 agents from the FBI showed up and said they want to talk to me. And I'm thinking, gosh, golly gee, this is great. They're digging in on MiMedx. So I say, fine, come on inside. They come inside, and they said, we want you to stop tweeting about Mr. Petite. And that's the guy who ran my medics. And I said, huh? Then they show me these tweets. I said, do you guys have a warrant? They said, no. I said, am I under investigation? They said, no. So I told my wife at the time to call my lawyer. My lawyer was like making pottery or something. Then I said, call the sheriff. So the sheriff came over. And then my lawyer called back and talked to the FBI agents and told me to get the hell out of there. And it was like crazy. And they said that if you don't stop tweeting about Mr. Petite, we'll have to come back and there'll be consequences. So I said, what are you going to do, shoot me? So they left, and it was outrageous. So we wrote a letter to the FBI and the DOJ demanding an explanation. And in the United States, you can do something called FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, and find out what went on. And the government comes back and says, there's 4 pages on you, and we'll get them to you in 4 months to 4 years. So I sued the FBI and I sued the DOJ on a FOIA basis, and it's still going on. But subsequent to our lawsuit, they've now turned over 1,360 pages they have on me. 1,368. So the federal government of the U.S. lied on that front. And in the 1,368 we've uncovered is some just horrifically bad stuff that went down, and you see how the process works of how people can get investigated and how they try to stifle the truth. I'm almost done with it, and when I get it, I think I'm going to make it all public, and one day I'm going to write a book on all this. But it's horrifically bad on what really goes on how they try to shut people up. And the so-called investigation into me died when the U.S. government indicted Parker Petite at my medics and his COO, and they went to prison. So you had criminals sort of vying with the government to try to do me in before I did them in, but
Wow.
I did them in before they did me in. So I'm able to be here with you. But that's a true story. So
it's an incredible story.
So when I say things are broken, they're broken beyond belief.
So it's interesting because in some areas you're sort of fighting with the authorities. In some areas you're supporting them and empowering them.
Yeah.
But maybe let's talk a little bit about how you initiated the takedown of Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX. I'd love to have you comment a little bit about how you stumbled across FTX, what we could learn from that experience, and then more broadly, how you're viewing what's left of the crypto financing world, including the institutions like Silvergate and Signature Bank, which again, you've also gone after as well.
Yeah, so it's an interesting story. So we go back to May of 22. I ride horses in Montana, and I had a horse accident, I guess. I was walking a horse out to turn him out and took his halter off, and he spooked, and he made a sharp left, and I went flying, and I broke my arm here, messed up my shoulder, so I got 9 screws in here and 2 plates. So I couldn't do anything in the spring of 22. I was out. And I was pissed off, and I was hurting, and I didn't take one painkiller, by the way. And this SBF was really bothering me. He was getting all this attention. Everyone was writing about him. And I just said, I need to look into him. So my girlfriend and I started doing some work, and we're saying nothing about this guy makes sense. We did reverse LinkedIns on everyone who worked for him, and one was a bigger goofball than the next. I talked to experts in the space. His story about the kimchi arbitrage made no sense. That was a lie. Tried to track down this Wayne character, who was his so-called partner who went to math camp somewhere in Canada, by the way. That didn't check out. No one had anything on him. And I started calling and talking to the people who were tight with SBF, asked them questions. No one had answers. So it looked like just this giant anecdotal thing that made no sense. So I called Bloomberg, who has done a lot of stories on me and I've worked with over the years. And I talked to their crypto team and give them all my stuff. And they said, we can't do anything negative about FTX or SBF because it'll be bad for our business and we'll lose access. That's what Bloomberg said to me. And, you know, SBF's chief legal guy, Dan Friedberg, was indicted on a poker cheating scandal. You know, of course, he has ties to Canada as well. and so I figure that all makes sense. And, you know, when you associate with bad people and people who can't count to 3 if they were given 1 and 2 who work for him, you start to say, how can this guy be worth $30 billion? Then I talked to exchange people and I said, how does this work? And, you know, real guys said it can't work, but he's throwing money around like crazy. And then crypto collapses and SBF says he's doing well. So I started squawking all over the place on Twitter. DOJ reached out to me on various things, and it was one thing that didn't make sense after another. There was nothing that fit, nothing checked out. Normally on frauds like Home Capital Group, there's a couple things that make sense, but a whole bunch of things that don't make sense. There are some things that fit. Like you could say, Home Capital makes loans. Yes, they do make loans. They do, you know, take in deposits. Check, check. With SBF and FTX, there was no box that was checked. And it's a perfect example of this guy and his handlers buying their way into publicity, investments, rhetoric. But the crazy, crazy thing is no one did any work on this. No one did any due diligence. It's a huge slap in the face to all these hedge fund guys, clowns like Scaramucci, that deadbeat Kevin O'Leary, all these guys who, by the way, I can't stand. So everyone who invested in FTX and SBF, no one did any due diligence. And it was just this giant failure. But the mainstream media wanted nothing to do with me on this. And no one wanted, I kept, you know, people who were interviewing me, I said, just give me 10 minutes with this guy. I'll expose him for exactly what he is. And then when it went apart, you know, people said, hey, this guy may know what he's talking about. And I then went after his bank, Silvergate. And Silvergate stock went from 60, it now trades at 18 cents. And then I moved it over to Signature Bank and exposed that. And that stock went from 130, it now trades at a penny. Truly trades at a penny. So those were good to me this year. They've covered for a lot of mistakes, and I make plenty of them. But you know, that SBF, Silvergate, and Signature, some people call that my triple crown. So they can't take that away from me.
No, they can't. But I do want to push back a little bit. And some of your critics have argued that some of the shorts that you've kind of gone after aren't as bad as you say they are. So
yeah, they're actually worse.
Okay. Well, let's. So I want to. You mentioned earlier. You mentioned actually a local story, Home Capital, and I know you waged a campaign against them. And of course, the stock dropped from like 54 to 5 or something like that. But you know, and the short work, but there was no losses, there was no runs on deposits, there was no fraud charges, and eventually Warren Buffett bailed them out.
There were huge runs on, for Home Cap, I'm taking off my glasses on this one, because I realize I'm playing in enemy territory here, but what do you guys, you drop the gloves? I'll just take off my glasses in case any of you want to rush the stage.
Just don't roll up your sleeves.
No. Well, I mean, here's the thing with Home Cap. And some of you guys may have owned it or shorted it or watched it or do business with them or whatever. Home Cap was a massive fraud, flat out. And some of you or people in Canada like to call it soft fraud. Well, that's like saying you're half pregnant. Fraud is fraud is fraud is fraud. And these guys were charged, and the 3 top people at Home Cap were banned from the business for 3 years by the Do Nothing OSC. And HomeCap was also fined $13.5 million. And Jerry Soloway inside traded HomeCap stock. And there were runs on the deposits. And there was a famous meeting that no one talks about. And there was a meeting of everybody, from Costa Depot to the Big Five to Equitable to the great Stephen Smith. There was this meeting of everybody to take out HomeCap. And I think the price they were talking about at the time was $2 a share. And everyone passed. Costa Depot passed, everyone passed. The Big Five passed. No one wanted anything to do with them, and the bank was set to fail. And Morneau, and God knows what the quid pro quo was with Warren Buffett, put the screws to him and basically gave him the sweetheart deal of sweetheart deals to save HomeCap. And everyone knows what Warren Buffett did there. And Warren Buffett sold his stock. He got it at a huge discount, premium, sold his stock. But nothing, I mean, the new CEO after Soloway they brought in, the guy's first name is Usury. So what kind of company in the subprime lending business brings in a new CEO and his name's Usury? I mean,
happens to be a great guy. I know him personally. He's a great guy.
He could be wonderful. Then just tell him to change his damn name. Change his name to Ulysses, for all I care. But HomeCap never cleaned up the fraudulent underwriting. You guys can say I embellish or whatever, but I've probably talked to, over my life, 400 or 500 of the people who they loan money to, and how they completely destroy people's lives with their fees and their rates and their charges and their threats and things like that. And Stephen Smith is going to have his hands full. I think he ended up taking HomeCap private because I think he wants to become too big to fail, because what's coming in this country in housing and in banking, I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. So it's going to be fascinating how this all plays out. But I think I was kind to HomeCap, and the media didn't want to cover this thing properly because the Globe and Mail is controlled by the government, CBC is controlled by the government. You can't say anything negative about banks. But it was a huge breakdown in how this company was allowed to go on for as long as they did. But it's now Stephen Smith's problem, and you could spell problem in caps.
So could you maybe just elaborate a little bit, because I think that your views on Canadian housing have been bearish for quite a while.
Yeah.
Presumably been shorting it.
Yeah.
I'd love to see if there's been any, how have those views been refined or updated? And also, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Canadian market vis-a-vis the frauds that you've identified. I mean, you've alluded to a number of us having a disproportionate number of bad actors, nefarious actors. We'd love to kind of hear a little bit more detail around what you're actually referring to.
Okay, so let's talk about housing first. I mean, my kick in housing really began in Vancouver in about 2015 because I was aware of all the money laundering that was going on. At the time, I said it was 10 billion, and people thought I was out of my mind. It's probably now closer to 30 billion. And there was an MP up there, his name was David Eby, and he is a lawyer, and he believed in my program. And there was a local reporter there named Sam Cooper, and they started digging into all the Chinese money laundering and started exposing it. The Liberal Party got thrown out. The NDP got thrown in. Eby was made Attorney General of the NDP, head of the NDP. The Premier got cancer a couple of years ago, and Eby was named the Premier. And my girlfriend and I were invited up. We were the only two Americans invited up for his inauguration when he was inaugurated. So I'm pretty plugged into Vancouver money laundering and housing. And just a statistic, we had dinner with him a month and a half ago. A statistic is the average family in British Columbia's family income is $65,000 a year. And the average home or place to live in BC is $1.1 million. Now, no matter where you are, those numbers don't work. And those numbers are buoyed by the CCP and others coming into Western Canada, laundering or putting their money in housing, taking it out for working class people, and hiding money there. So the Canadian housing market will last as long as this government allows money laundering to go. But truly, you need housing to become affordable so young people can live and work in this country, because most people who I know are dying to get out of here, but they stay here because their families are here. So housing is a money laundering vehicle. It's not affordable. I mean, there are some people, like yourself, who make real money in this country legitimately and pay taxes legitimately. But the real problem is going to be inflation, interest rates, and the currency. And I think the currency is going to go to hell in a handbasket when these three things try to straighten themselves out. I think a lot of the people, I call them the kitten and rainbow crowd here, who's just happy their house keeps going up, is going to realize the dynamic. It's not because people want to live in Canada. Don't kid yourself. I mean, they all want to go to the lake in the summer. I get that, in Muskoka.
Muskoka, yeah.
Yeah, but it's a lovely place and the people are nice. But the money laundering over interest rates, inflation, and the currency is something to be very, very, very leery of. So I'm as negative on Canadian housing as I've ever been. But I have no short positions because I don't want to be detained at the airport anymore because I'm always detained there. I don't want to be investigated here anymore. I don't want to be sued here anymore. And I'm just leaving everyone to themselves, and I wish everyone the best.
Is there anything on this side of the border that, or anything in Canada that you're actually working on as a potential campaign?
Before I hit that one, I'm going to hit the second part about these fraudsters in Canada. Oh, yeah. I took down Concordia, which was a drug company which charged people 10 to 15 times too much. And I called the CEO names, and he decided to sue me, and of course that was thrown out. I worked on Valiant, which was another overpriced drug thing which ripped people off. We, of course, had Home Cap, had Badger Daylight in Alberta. They haven't made a number in God knows how long. The Alberta Security Commission sued me to stop trading in the stock and stop saying bad things about the company. And they sued me on the 4th of July in the United States. I call them up, I say, it's the 4th of July, you're only giving me 10 days to respond. They say, we're not offering you an extension. So I had to hire an Alberta lawyer, do the whole thing in Alberta court, and I kicked their ass and won. So speaking truth to power in this country just doesn't work. And the problem is, free markets should be free. And you guys should be able to speak your mind. And you should be able to, the good thing here is you don't allow people to have guns. So that's good. And that's you get a big check there. And the beer used to be really good. It's not so good anymore. The craft brews down in the States are better. But the problem is you can't really speak your mind and expose what goes on, because I think that if the forward-thinking people knew exactly what was going on, I think they'd be scared to death. And an example is Trudeau seizing the trucker protesters' bank accounts. There's no reason for that. That makes no sense. But it's going to be a fascinating period coming up in Canada, and when I get positive on this place, I'll let y'all know. Okay. But I sure wouldn't have any money in the loonie. I'll tell you that. I'd be out of that thing.
Well, I got to tell you, this conversation is doing wonders for my nationalism. And so I'm going to shift gears a little bit, because what's interesting is people know you as a short seller, but what they don't realize that you've made a ton of money on the long side.
Yeah.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about your investment philosophy with your longs and some examples of perhaps companies that you own and are excited about today.
Okay. Yeah,
And what's unique about them? Like, what exhibits your investment philosophy?
Okay. That's a good question. See, the short thing, I've made money over the years, but it's very difficult. It's more of a social thing to rid bad guys. You know, the one, you know, I'm old, I'm 63. I've been doing this since I was 21, and some of these years I've had are like dog years. They're like 7. So I don't know how old I really am, but I feel like I'm about 29, but sometimes my mind plays tricks. You know, that syndicated mortgage with those Fortress guys, I helped expose them as well, but the Globe and Mail didn't want to do it. Stuff like that just needs to stop here. I just wanted to bring that up. But you really make money being a long guy, and I've had some great longs over the years. I had Canandaigua Wine, which is now Constellation Brands. We owned the thing when Wine Cooler killed them at about $3. We sold it at 40, and adjusted for splits, it's probably about 800 right now. And I was in Activision. We had 5% of Activision when it was a $50 million market cap. We sold that after making 10 times. Now I think it's a $50 billion cap. But, you know, I really like 2 things right now. I love Overstock, that's OSTK. It's about a $16 stock. They have $7 in cash. They have no debt. I think they have about $9 to $10 in private, you know, venture investments on the blockchain that I think are probably worth $8, $9. And they have a retail business that does $1.6 billion. The stock, they acquired the Bed Bath & Beyond trademark for $21 million. Everyone got excited, took the stock to 40. Now it's 16. I'm pals with Marcus Lemonis, who runs Camping World. I pushed management, or I pushed the board to put him on the board. They took him on the board, and I think, you know, great things are going to happen there. So I own a ton of that. I own so much of that, it's dangerous. And I own a lot of a silicon battery company called Enovix, ENVX. It's like a $10 stock, $1.6 billion cap. You know, instead of lithium, which is a hard to get out of the ground issue, their batteries are made of silicon, and they last 50% longer. The chairman is my pal, TJ Rogers. I always say, bet the jockey, not the horse. If you own companies with really good managements, you have a shot. If you own companies with shitty managements, they'll kill you. Mm-hmm. So I don't really, I care about the horse, but I really care about the jockey. So I loved bringing in Lemonis to Overstock, and I really, really, really like the management of Enovix. I mean, these names are speculative. Enovix is more speculative than Overstock. But if these guys execute, the stocks could turn into big stocks. And, you know, I believe in risk. And I believe to make a lot of money, you know, sometimes risky assets make sense. But you have to know where your downside is. I mean, the downside to me in OVIX is 3, stock's 10. Downside in Overstock essentially is right here. But I don't know, I like being able to do both things.
And what makes a good jockey? Like you said, you bet on the jockey.
Well, that's a really good, that's a good question. So back when my daughter was graduating the 8th grade, the class elected a speaker for graduation, and they elected me. So the head of the school came to me and said, what do you want to talk about? I said, I want to talk about failure. She said, really? I said, yeah. She said, why? I said, because it's important to take your shots, and if you fail, you learn from it. And the head of school said, thank you, and calls me back 2 days later. She said, we're going in a different direction because the board doesn't want you talking about failure. I said, okay. So what makes a good jockey are people who are smart driven but have failed in the past and have learned from their mistakes. I failed many, many, many times.
You know what, given whoever that was, they shouldn't be alone.
I mean, I failed many, many times in the past, and the people who are really, I mean, even Stephen Smith, the guy's been bankrupt, and where I admire him is he picked himself up and turned it around and turned himself into a big deal. He's worth $5 billion. So good jockeys are people who try hard, have failed, learn from their failings, and become better and rise above it, because business is hard. and it's hard to do things. And this T.J. Rogers, to me, is the greatest thing since canned beer. He's 76 years old. He has no kids. He's driven. I watched him turn a company called Enphase, where he shows up, the stock's at $1, literally. He puts $10 million into the company. He brings in the right people. The stock goes from 1 to 400, and he has 10 million shares. And he did it because he brought in the right people. He knew the company's problems. He fixed it. And 1 to 400 is pretty good to me. And he owns 22 million shares of Enovix, and he's been buying more stock. And I like the guy, and I believe in the product. I think the battery works. And if it works, it'll be a household name in a couple of years. If it doesn't work, you guys will say, I remember this guy who was wearing pink shoes speaking in Arctic Mexico, and this Enovix was a complete flop. So we'll see. But I own it, and I like it.
Yeah.
But the jockey's important, but learning from your failures is important as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's it. It all mixes in. All these guys who talk big and have the greased back hair and have the polished nails. I have this wig indicator. If you guys ever see a CEO who wears a wig, call me because I'll short the shit out of it, but never give him any money. I mean, there was that guy with foo-foo hair. I'm drawing a blank on what company he ran here. It went from like 16 to 0. I wasn't short it because I was too occupied chasing these home cap guys around. But.
What do most investors get wrong? In other words, what parting advice or wisdom would you offer for family offices and investors, private investors in the room?
Okay, I'll give you some bonus answers to that.
Please.
Don't feel it's not okay to be alone. Don't invest with a group under the FOMO. Don't say, because everyone's going into Sequoia, I want to go into Sequoia as well. Think things through and find managers who are unique, stick out, have a process, and work through the process. Because those people are very successful, and they're not afraid of being alone. I'm not afraid of being a lone wolf by myself in any position. There's a guy who I respect greatly in this country. His name is Roland Kuiper. Mm-hmm. He's probably the best investor I've ever known. I think Ubben's number 2, but Roland is fantastic. And he's nasty, he's smart, he asks tough questions, he's cheap as a nickel whistle, and he's driven. And he doesn't mind being alone because he has tremendous confidence in his ability. So find managers who are confident, who are battle-tested. They can be young. Don't look for guys who check all the boxes, who meet all the things that everyone needs. Find people with process, discipline, smarts, who think these things through. And I think don't go to where the crowds are, where everyone rushed to SBF. Everyone rushed to crypto. Everyone rushed to the pot stocks. Everyone rushed to online gambling. All the fads in Canada, they all blow up. And the scamsters sort of jump from one to another. When you see something popular in this country, stay away from it. Go elsewhere. Please don't invest in Canadian-based AI. You will probably lose 98% of your money. If you want to trade it, but stay away from that stuff. So people think that, you can't perform every day. The markets are sort of like a pinball machine and they're broken. But get a theory, get a thought, get something that you think can work with smart, patient people. And when you hire managers, let them do their jobs. I mean, the one thing I couldn't stand was, my investors knew what I was in. They knew why I was in it. It would go against us for a while. I mean, I remember Lafayette University. I'm not afraid to mention their name. They had a lot of money with us, and we were short this thing called Novastar, and that's the one that Harvard Business School wrote the case about me on. And I don't know, the stock went from like 40 to 100, and the guy calls me up and he says, "What's your lost discipline in Novastar?" I said, "I have none." They said, "Like, what does that mean?" I said, "This thing is a scam. This thing is a fraud. I've been to their offices. They don't exist. I'm working on it." He says, "Well, you need to have a loss discipline." I said, "I don't have a loss discipline. I have my money in the fund. I know I'm right, and I'm going to see this thing through." He says, "That's not acceptable. We're going to put in a withdrawal request at the end of the quarter." I said, "I'll make it easy for you." I said, "I'll send it to you at the end of the week." And we sent him his money, and the stock was about 98, as I recall. And we're getting our brains beat in. And I can sleep, but it was bothering me. Stock went from 98, it went to about 105, then it went from 105 to 0. That's spelled Z-E-R-O. I called up that guy when the stock was 3, and this is the truth. When it was 3, they announced earnings and they wrote off $50 a share when the stock was 3. And I just said, you know, when you hassle me like this, no one's harder on me than me. That is for sure. And again, the lesson is when some legitimate operator runs your money, they are plenty hard on themselves when they're not performing. They don't need you ragging their ass, "Why are you doing so bad?" They know why they're doing so bad. They feel it and they keep score. And I told this, I said, you know, you ingrained this in my head that I was going to work my ass off to prove your sorry ass wrong. And I did. And the stock is now 3. And you could have made a pot full of money if you didn't hassle me. And you know, this is a tough gig for tough people. And you got to find, you know, tough people willing to fight it out, willing to be alone, willing to see it through, willing to take the pressure. And then, you know, the world's broken, so you don't always win. So we'll see. That's a long answer to your question.
Mark, that was incredible and comical. And
Comical? Oh, my Lord.
No, it was amazing.
Can I pick up my glasses now? Or?
Yeah, you can pick up your glasses as long as you don't punch me.
Okay.
No, but really, we cannot thank you enough for flying all the way from Montana to join us.
No, I flew from Spain to come in here.
Oh, okay.
I came, you know, we were in Europe for 17 days, and then we figured we'd come to Arctic Mexico to see you, and then I'm going to San Francisco tomorrow.
Well, we really do appreciate it.
Well, you do a great job,
Thank you.
and it's an honor to be here for you.
Thank you.